Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of Eat the Donut. I have a very special guest on today, a strength and powerlifting coach who turns regular human beings into absolute specimens, known from my own experience. But he's the owner of Bonvec Strength. Definitely has a huge passion for powerlifting, like I said, for helping people, also for fishing. He loves craft beer, loves ripping the guitar. I see it all the time. Welcome, Tony Bonvecchio. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. How's everything going?
Things are going well. Yeah. Working, lifting, spending time with my wife and my two kids. Just turned 37 years old and I feel way better at 37 than I did at 36. So yeah, life is good.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, because I just saw you had, was it hip surgery or hip replacement surgery?
Yep. I had a hip replacement on April 8th of last year. So we are a year and 2 days removed from a total hip replacement.
Wow. How was that recovery process?
It was honestly not bad at all.
Hmm.
My experience was very, very positive. I played baseball for about 20 years. I was a
Yeah.
catcher,
Yeah.
and then segued right from baseball into powerlifting. So you're just looking at like about 30 years
Sure.
of just wear and tear, and um, dealt with pretty significant hip pain for the better
Yeah.
part of like 2 years. And it's kind of a funny story. I thought that I was having a kidney stone
Sure.
over the holidays, and I'd had a kidney stone before, so I'm like, I know what's going on. Like, I instead of going to the ER, I'm just going to self-medicate with like Advil and stuff, and just deal with it. And it wasn't getting better, so eventually, I went to the ER in like the middle of the night and got a CAT scan. There was no kidney stone, but the doctor comes in and he's like, so no kidney stone, but do you have hip pain? I'm like, fuck yeah, I do. Like my hip hurts really, really bad. And it was the imaging done, looking for the kidney
Sure.
stone that ended up not being there. That finally, made me realize that I had to take some action. So at that point, my right hip was so degenerative and the arthritis was so bad and my labrum was torn.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get the hip replacement. And, you know, the modern medicine is incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's an outpatient procedure. I got the surgery done in the morning.
Hmm.
I was walking with a walker and with crutches very shortly after getting out of surgery, and then I think I went back to work 7 days post-op, hobbling around on crutches but still
Hmm.
like on my feet. I did my first upper body training session, like I think 7 days post-op. My first lower body training session 12 days post-op. Within 12 weeks, I was squatting 500 pounds again,
Holy shit.
and just like totally new lease on life.
Wow.
I I definitely am very, very grateful that I had such a extensive strength training background prior to
Sure.
getting surgery. That definitely made the recovery process a lot smoother. I had a great physical therapist who I worked with, and yeah, just being able to move around pain free. To I couldn't sleep, when my hip
Hmm.
was really bad. Just
Sure.
like when most of the time the things that lead to needing hip surgery is lack of hip extension, lack of hip internal rotation. And when you're lying down in bed, it just pushes you into those positions. So I would
Sure.
just toss and turn all night. So obviously, when you can't sleep, everything else suffers dramatically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can play with my kids. I can
Yeah.
go out in my kayak and fish. Just everything got so much better. So yeah, very, very positive experience. I hope, I never hope that somebody has to go through that.
Sure.
But when I put up that post the other day, I had so many people reach out and be like, "Hey, I'm dealing with the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think?" And it's a major surgery, right? You're getting
Yeah.
a one of the biggest joints in your body replaced. But yeah, it just gave me a totally new lease on life and training, and so very positive experience on my end.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like you're saying, where sort of like medicine has come. But just knowing like people I used to train in the past and people I know is just hearing how, oh, like I had this surgery and then I walked out of there basically. Obviously it's a little challenging, but like the ability to walk out of there is incredible with a total hip replacement, right?
Yep.
And I like what you said on the idea of, obviously just noticing like your quality of life, how challenging it was not being able to sleep, probably tough to play with your kid Claire, and then going into this lifestyle now. Obviously, you have to go through the process of recovery and rehabbing it and all that stuff, but just having this like new spark into life where it's like, holy shit, I can do all these things now. It doesn't hurt. And even able to go, come back to squatting 500 plus pounds is pretty incredible. So it's pretty awesome to hear.
Yep, and it gave me a new appreciation
Mm,
for the preventative side of things.
yeah.
So I think now as a coach, it made me kind of reevaluate the way that I was coaching my lifters,
Hmm.
being a little bit more adamant about warming up properly. If somebody was dealing with like nagging aches and pains, not just kind of like brushing it off
Yeah.
and being like, all right, well, if it's under a certain threshold, like let's push through it.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're a power lifter, if you like training really hard and heavy, you're going to
Hmm.
deal with aches and pains and bumps and
Sure.
bruises. But I am a little bit more aware of the way that I train people and how it might
Mhm.
negatively impact their daily activities.
Yeah.
Because not everybody's willing to, be in a significant amount of pain all the time just to be a
Yeah.
good lifter.
Yeah.
I would say that's, the probably like the 1% of all people who exercise. So yeah, more of the preventative side, make sure that, you have good range of motion in your joints, making sure that you're paying attention to the
Yeah.
warm ups, making sure that you're adjusting accordingly. If
Mhm.
somebody is in pain, that I think I got a renewed appreciation for that as well.
For sure. For sure. And it's probably even funny how even like from my experience, I think is how you start to sort of shift your mindset, let's say, where I think when I was, let's say younger, like early 20s and up to even like late 20s, you just kind of ignore that shit, or at least me personally. You're like, fuck it, I just want to keep lifting heavy. Like I don't care what the cost is of that until eventually you're very limited to things or things are just going away. Like I remember having knee pain at one point and early 20s, I'd be like, oh, it's gone in 2 days. And then, when I'm in my early 30s, I'm like, man, it's been like 3 weeks and it's not going away. Like, what the hell's going on? So just like you said, having that new appreciation, and at least again, investing into prehabbing it, making sure like we are being aware of these things so we don't make this worse than it needs to be. But anyways, Tony, I kind of want to start with your story. Like, your story, I already know you dove into a little bit of it being a baseball player, shifting into, obviously a powerlifting coach. But what was the first thing that got you into fitness itself, into lifting itself, even before the powerlifting?
Yeah, I started lifting consistently and with, an intention of lifting for performance as a freshman in college. So I played baseball all through high school, knew I wanted to play college baseball. So I walked on as a baseball player at Southern New Hampshire University in Manchester, New Hampshire, and played it lifted somewhat casually.
Hmm.
I always kind of starting in as a senior in high school, but I would just go to the local fitness center and just kind of like do a couple circuits on the machines. But after our first fall season of college baseball, our coach gave us a strength training routine to follow, and it was not great in terms of preparing somebody to play baseball. It was just kind of a cookie cutter like 4 day program, kind of like upper body, lower body.
Hmm.
But I followed it to a T. I got a lot stronger. I started to put on a lot of good muscle mass. And as somebody who was like undersized and didn't have a lot of self-esteem in any way, shape, or form, just the results I was getting from training hard were really, really satisfying. And we had fitness testing for our baseball team in the fall and in the spring, and we carried, I don't know, maybe like 30 guys on the roster. And the first fitness testing that we did before we started that routine, there was some sort of score that was given to you, and I came
Sure.
in 12th on the team, as this tiny little freshman who
Yeah.
just, basically didn't belong there, only made the team, kind of on work ethic alone. And then after a full winter and spring of training on that program, we did testing again, and I finished third on the team. And that was just so gratifying
Sure.
because, with any sort of team sport, you are going to be evaluated on your level of skill.
Hmm.
And that's what it should be. And with baseball, is like no matter how hard I worked, I just was so far behind everybody else
Yeah.
skill wise. And I could try my hardest in practice. I could try my hardest in games and sometimes not see the results for my
Mhm.
efforts. But with strength training, it was like a 1-to-1 ratio. It was
Sure.
like I got out of it exactly what I put in. And that was very satisfying to me. So I made all those improvements. And then just through my own uh, curiosity, figuring out like, okay, like I really want to take this to the next level. I started doing more research and
Mhm.
figuring out like, okay, maybe I can train a little bit differently. I can train in a way that will actually have a little bit more carryover to my baseball performance. And that's why I started getting into more barbell training, getting
Mhm.
into more, I guess you could call it sports specific training. That's kind
Sure.
of a weird term, but that's what eventually led me to training in more of a powerlifting style. I somewhere along the line came across Joe DeFranco, who
Hmm.
at the time was one of the first guys to open kind of like the warehouse style, hardcore gym, and he was
Yeah.
training a lot of NFL guys. And he had a program called West Side for Skinny Bastards.
Yeah.
And if anybody's listening to this who has been in the game long enough, they know who Joe DeFranco is. Maybe they've run the same program. But it was, adapted Louis Simmons conjugate, West Side approach and made it a little bit more relevant to athletes.
Mhm.
So I was doing a lot of heavy squatting, I was doing a lot of heavy bench pressing, but I was also doing a lot of sprinting and a lot of jumping and a lot of things that were helping me become more athletic. And I ended up transferring schools. I transferred to a smaller college closer to home, St. Michael's College,
Mhm.
and had my junior and senior year were much more uh, satisfying in terms of baseball. I got to play a lot more. I did pretty well
Sure.
my senior year, but I could always tell that I was going to be a better lifter than I was a baseball
Sure.
player. So by my senior year, I was training for powerlifting. I graduated in May of 2010 from undergrad and did my first powerlifting competition in November of that same year. So segued right from baseball right into powerlifting, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. It was so much fun. I loved lifting heavy, and again, just fell in love with the way that the results were so tangible. Spent all those years playing baseball, being very, very dedicated to it,
Yep.
and the skill just wasn't there to have
Yeah.
a very meaningful baseball experience. There was not going to be any baseball for me beyond college,
Sure.
but powerlifting's forever.
Yeah.
There's a reason there are age divisions, there are reasons
Mhm.
there are weight classes, and anybody can play and
Mhm.
anybody can have a meaningful powerlifting experience. So yeah, first competition in 2010. I eventually decided that I wanted to coach because of the very satisfying experience that I got out of training.
Mhm.
So after I graduated from college, I got my master's degree in exercise science, and worked a desk job as I kind of segued into the field because I was already in my mid 20s. It was a little
Mhm.
bit too I was too late to the game
Sure.
to be like a collegiate strength coach or anything like that. So um, I started personal training on the side as I was working a desk job, and then eventually left that desk job to go do an internship at Cressy Sports Performance in
Yep.
Hudson, Massachusetts, the baseball training mecca at the time. Pretty much anybody who trains athletes has, Cressy Sports Performance to
Sure.
thank for making that a viable career path, sports performance training in the private sector.
Sure.
And then in 2017, I opened my own gym and have been a gym owner and full-time powerlifting coach ever since.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. Um, you're telling this story and I'm like, this is sort of me. Not that I'm a powerlifting coach or anything like that, but going from baseball in college, right? Similar, same position to like catching, and then just through college, finding the passion for training. Because like you said, it's just something that you were realizing like, hey, the reward of this training, being consistent with this training, I'm getting pretty good at this. And so, and it's something like you said, where the skill of baseball, you kind of can just reach your peak, and that's okay. Like it is what it is. Like some people have it, and some people, will get so far until they can't go anymore. And it was just very like similar to sort of what you were saying as far as, transition and finding this passion for training and lifting, and then almost wanted to keep that going. And that was sort of developed because of baseball. It's like, all right, I want to get stronger and faster and better and more athletic and all these things. Your strength and conditioning, and it ended up working like doing it for baseball, but transitioning into, wait, I'm actually pretty good at this. And I obviously have, again, growing a passion into it as well. That, hey, like I want to keep this going. Now, what was there any like specific moment, or I guess that's not a good question, but was there something that maybe want made you want to help start, coaching others? I know at first like you were powerlifting for yourself and wanted to start competing, but was there anything there? Was it just like, hey, I just really like, lifting and I want to help other people's lifts?
Yeah, it really started when some of my roommates and teammates in college started going to the gym with me,
Hmm.
and I was much further ahead in my lifting journey than they were. So they were asking me, "What should I do? How do I do this? Can you look at my technique?" And I just kind of started coaching them just
Sure.
because they were my training partners, and I realized I kind of had a knack for communicating all these things that people need to learn in order to lift effectively. And I think a lot of it came from my undergrad background. My bachelor's degree is in journalism,
Hmm.
and journalism is often in the written form, but there's very much a verbal component to it. So I had kind of formal training in communicating. And I think that's what made me realize that, like, number one, I love doing this. Number two, I think I'm good at helping people figure out how to do this. And number three, I think I'm just a good communicator. So it made me realize that, like, this could be a viable career path for me. I'm pretty good at helping others figure this stuff out. And there's probably very, very few ventures in life that people spend so much time and energy in where they have very, very little idea of how to do it effectively as fitness. A lot of people work out, but don't see the results of their efforts because what they're doing is perhaps not optimal or organized in an intelligent way, or they never seek out help for it.
Hmm.
So it made me realize that I can help people avoid that hamster wheel of
Sure.
putting in the time, putting in the effort, and not seeing the results from it because they don't have anybody to help them. So that's, yeah, working out with my college teammates, my roommates, and helping them kind of fall in love with it the way that I fell in love with it. That's when I realized that coaching was what I wanted to do.
Sure. So I actually want to rewind a little bit because I know you mentioned something as far as having like a lower self-esteem in college. Was that for specifically baseball? And if so, what was sort of like that experience? Maybe where did it come from? And was there anything that you feel like helped with that or helped you develop a better self-esteem?
Yeah, so I didn't realize like how small I was or like how shitty at baseball I was until I got to college. Um, and I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, very, very small town. Not even like a big fish in a small pond. I was probably like a medium fish in a puddle. Like
Mhm.
that's how small it was.
Sure.
Um, but when I got to college, like everybody was good. And most of my teammates were like big, strong, athletic
Mhm.
dudes. And nobody had ever really given me the wake up call of like how far behind I was.
Sure.
I'm 5'6" on a good day. When I got into college, I think I was like a buck 75.
Hmm.
Um, like a still a pretty like strong person. But once I realized that, like, hey, like I'm undersized, I'm underskilled, and like my teammates let me know every single day that that was
Yeah.
the case for me, and that made me feel bad. And I don't, nobody did it like maliciously or anything like that.
Sure.
It's just the way that team sports are, right? You
Yeah.
bust each other's balls, you give each
Yeah.
other a hard time. Um, but I think because it was so kind of shell shocking for me, like I felt bad about it, and I
Hmm.
needed something to build my confidence. And the way that I was putting on muscle and getting stronger, improving my physique, improving my performance, that helped a lot, and it gave me a lot of confidence in a lot of other avenues in life. So yeah, besides just the sports performance benefits I was receiving,
Yeah.
I was also becoming a much more confident person, feeling more comfortable in my own skin because of what strength training was giving me.
Yeah, for sure. It's so funny. You're sort of first at bat playing college baseball, from my experience. It's like they throw me a curveball first pitch. I'm like, fuck, is this what it's going to be like? I'm always saying
Yep.
fastball.
Yep.
This is a pain in the ass. I got to deal with this and actually have to read the pitch and everything.
Yep.
It's too funny.
And
Um,
I know you went
yeah,
through a pretty dramatic weight loss in your journey, right?
sure,
So I'm sure that that resonates with you, the whole like the way that strength training just changes your entire identity, and it changes the way
for
that you
sure.
carry yourself. It changes the way that you're able to interact with other people. It's hard to put a price on the confidence that comes with the benefits of strength training.
It's so funny. I was actually having a conversation with one of my old online co-coaches, and we were talking, and I was like, obviously I work specifically with people who are struggling with weight loss and trying to work on some patterns, behaviors, things of that nature. And obviously, like with weight loss, I always will say like nutrition's the driver. We got to manage our calories, manage our protein, make sure everything's in check there. But like when someone first starts out, I always love the idea of just having them start with like, hey, let's just get used to strength training. Let's get used to lifting because it's going to do so much more, or it's going to do a lot for you, right? It's going to help you, obviously get stronger, build strength, but like the mental component of it is like when you start getting stronger, building muscle, like there's this empowering feeling because of that. But also in return is, with specifically like my clientele, it's like they have the good workout, they get strong, and now it's like, all right, like now I'm building some like self-efficacy here, some confidence here that I want to complement this with nutrition. I want to, my adherence to now focusing on my nutrition is going to be a little bit stronger or a little bit more intentional. So I just always love the idea of just like, hey, let's, nutrition will come. We'll, not that we're not going to pay attention to it, but let's really dial in our movement and our training and just watch it impact other areas of our life as well. Yeah, and like exactly what you said is, I went into college, you know, coming from a position of probably low self-esteem, some body image stuff going on. And so I would say like my excuse was like, yeah, I want to get better at baseball, but really I wanted to do it for me. And this was my time to do it just from a personal standpoint. And yeah, just seeing the impact it had on my life, just it can do some incredible things for people in their life. Um, but very cool. Now, started your gym in 2017. What was that experience like?
It was hard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably the second hardest thing I ever did besides having kids. I think
Sure.
being a parent to two kids is hands down the hardest thing I've ever done. But starting a gym was number two. And luckily I had a business partner, Greg Robbins, who I was working with at Cressy Sports Performance, and he really gave me the push to have the guts to open a gym. I don't think I would have done it on my own. And now I am on my own, but had I not spent, the better part of 4 years doing it with a business partner, I probably would still be an employee and not an
Mhm.
employer and a business owner. But I think we did it in an intelligent way in that we both had thriving online businesses. We were both, gainfully employed as coaches for a business that somebody else owns. And obviously, the entire crew at Cressy Sports Performance was incredibly helpful. Learned a ton under them, saw the way that a very, very successful business was run. So learned a lot on that front. And I think we were very fortunate that with the combination of our online businesses and the in-person client roster that we had established already, we were profitable without having a single new in-person client when we opened our gym. And I think I see a lot of people do it the other way, where they open a gym because they love working out, and it's like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to I'm going to sign the lease. I'm going to fill the space with equipment. I'm going to, acquire all these expenses, and I'll just figure it out afterwards.
Sure.
And some people do. Some people make it work that way. but my level of anxiety would never be able to handle that. So the fact that we were able to pay ourselves from day one to be, profitable from day one without having to generate a ton of new business, that was very, very helpful for us. So yeah, we allowed our online revenue to drive the in-person business and not vice versa. I think a lot of people do it in reverse. So we were fortunate to have that experience. And there's just so many headaches and challenges and obstacles that come along with business ownership in any industry. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that none of us have it figured out. We're all just figuring it out as we go. There's no blueprint for how to do it. You just have to go in with a plan that makes sense and be willing to adjust on the fly, to be able to pivot. All these words and cliches, but
Yeah.
it's really what you're doing. You're just
Yeah.
constantly trying to figure it out as you go. Um, and there's no one way to do it, and everything is going to cost more money and take more time than what you think it is. So
Hmm.
you have to be prepared for that. Yeah, you have to have
Yeah.
thick skin. There are going to be a lot of really, really bad days where you think like, I'm not cut out for this. This isn't going to work. But I think as long as you are like, just like strength training, as long as you're consistent, as long as the work is there. The thing about business though is that there's no taking your foot off the gas.
Yeah.
With exercise, you can kind of get away with, having some days where you pull back and you
Sure.
just accept that, like, okay, today's not my day. I'm just going to kind of go through the motions.
Hmm.
Business ownership is not like that.
Yeah.
It's like a fucking powerlifting meet every single day.
Yeah.
You have to be ready to go. You have to be on your A game. There's not really any like backing off the throttle at all if you want
Sure.
to be successful.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a great point where I feel like in a lot of aspects of life of being a dad, right? It's like you kind of have a game plan, but you also kind of have to figure it out on the way. It's things are going to pivot, things are going to adjust, and you just got to be prepared to make those adjustments and those pivots, whether it's running a business or being a dad or whatever it may be. Um, but it's a great point. That's something that when I heard that myself, it was sort of like, all right, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It seems like everyone's got it figured out, but I
It's
feel
all a
like,
lie, man.
yeah,
Anybody who says they've got it figured out is absolutely full of shit. And there's a lot of people out there who their business is teaching other people how to run a business
sure.
or teaching people how to market. And they've got all these systems, and it's like just plug and play, like my system, and you're going to get, X amount of new revenue and X amount of new clients. Like, I really think most of those people are completely full of shit,
Yeah.
because none of us have it figured out, and nothing
Hmm.
is plug and play. Nothing is cookie cutter. Everybody's
Right.
situation is unique. Yes, there are fundamentals. There are
Yeah.
certain fundamental, just like there is with fitness. There are certain
Sure.
fundamentals and principles that everything has to kind of boil down to. Same thing with running a business,
Hmm.
but there's so much that is outside of your control.
Hmm.
And really, the only thing in life that you can do is control what you can control,
Yeah.
but there's going to be a bunch of stuff outside of your control. And your success or lack thereof is what you do in response to what happens to you.
Yeah.
And all these bad things can happen, and all these fires can come up that you have to put out. And if you let yourself get too bogged down, and you feel sorry for yourself, or you
Hmm.
say like, oh well, like woe is me, you're not going to get very far. So
Sure.
you have to control what you can control, and just like temper your reaction to every obstacle that happens. You can't control if you have a month where you have several clients who step away from training. You can't
Sure.
control that. If somebody moves away, or somebody has a job change that requires them to step away, you can't control if your facility gets bought by the business next door and you got to be
Yeah.
out of your facility within 3 months, like what happened to me. You
Sure.
can't control you can't control if your would-be landlord disappears with your deposit and you're not able to move into your facility, like what happened to me a couple of years
There
ago.
you go.
But you can control your response to it.
Yeah.
And if you choose not to panic, if you choose to ask for help from
Hmm.
other people who have been in your shoes and who have been successful and come out on the other side, like those are the things that you have to do. You have to manage your response to the things that happen to you. And
Yeah,
it'd be very, very easy. There would have been many, many times in my journey where I think nobody would have blamed me for stepping away or doing something different.
sure.
Um, but I didn't always have the best response to those
Yeah,
bad things that happened to
you're
me.
human.
Everybody's human, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody's invincible, nobody's a
Hmm.
robot. Um, but you can take a second, take a deep breath, see things for what it is, see things for what they are. And I think a mindset shift that helped me a lot was choosing to decide that things were happening for me instead of to me.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, this catastrophic situation has arisen. Um, how can this help me? How
Yeah.
can I learn from this? How can I do better? The
Hmm.
pandemic was one of those, right?
Sure.
I was a gym owner in 2020 when gyms shut down for months and months and months
Hmm.
and months. And I was in a business mentorship group at the time with a lot of people who didn't ended up making it. And that
Sure.
sucks. That was really,
Yeah.
really sad. Um, I'm watching through these people go through all these struggles and seeing them step away and seeing them give up. And it's not like a knock on anybody who decided to change career paths or step away during this period where like nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew when gyms were going to be able to open back up. Nobody knew when people were going to come back to the gym, right? Because so many
Yeah.
clients for everybody's businesses decided that they were going to do something different, right? I'm going to build
Hmm.
a home gym and I'm going to do that instead. Or I'm going to take up a different type of fitness. I don't
Yeah.
want to go to an enclosed space anymore. I want to do more running and hiking and cycling and
Hmm.
step away from the service that you are offering me. Um, but I didn't want to quit. I did not want to quit. So, um, all these things that made you totally reevaluate the way you were doing things, my business runs much better now than it did beforehand. And it was
Sure.
all because of the things that I was forced to reevaluate and
Yeah.
change my approach. So yeah, bad things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's your choice how you decide to react to the bad things that happen to you.
Yeah, and it's true, like you're saying, right? Like you're gonna honestly learn so much through experience, right? Whether that experience is good or really shitty, like a lot of the things that you were talking about with someone taking your deposit, obviously being a coach of a gym or owning a gym through COVID, which is really tough stuff. But it's really just like you're just excuse me, you're deciding basically like, well, we're gonna figure it out. Like that's it. There's no other option almost. Like just figure it out. Like what is the next best, thing that we can do or at least give us the best chance to make the next best step to help us succeed in any sort of way. So just to tell the listeners, Tony was my coach for about a year. I remember actually during COVID or like maybe toward the later end of COVID, I purchased one of his programs, which was his hypertrophy program and got incredible results. Probably got at that time like the biggest I've ever been. Like got some phenomenal results. And at that time too, I was very interested into powerlifting. I was one pretty timid to ask anyone or didn't know how to approach it. And so trying that program, got a great experience and knowing Tony did coach powerlifters, I was like reached out, I was like, hey, I really want to try powerlifting. I want to compete at some point, and I honestly just really wanted a coach too to get me as strong as possible. And had an incredible experience with you. Got the strongest I ever was. Like those are the highest numbers I've ever touched, and felt pretty decent doing it as well. And one thing I remember just visiting your gym at the time and working with you is my experience was awesome. Coming in, even as like someone with a background or some experience in fitness, still feeling pretty timid and obviously seeing the what numbers you're putting up, what numbers your clients are putting up and everything just wondering if I would fit in, but just having this great experience. Everyone was so welcoming. When I first got there, you were so welcoming. Just felt like, I know we would chat online or on the phone and stuff like that. But meeting you for the first time is just felt like, oh, I've known this guy and he just makes me feel so welcome. Now, I kind of want to ask you more on when creating or opening up at first the Strength House and then Bonvec Strength, did you have this idea of what you wanted your gym to stand for or what kind of experience you wanted to create for your clientele?
For sure, for sure. I think our vision initially was to open a facility where we could help people fall in love with the process of training, because
Sure.
that really is what determines people's success, because it is a process. Um, I was talking earlier about, falling in love with lifting because of the results, but the results come as a product of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you see this with your clients as well. The clients who have the most success are the ones who love the process. They love the daily work that it requires. They love the regimen and they love the consistency. And you really kind of have to set up your life in a way that you just constantly make good decision after good decision, from a training standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint. And that's what we set out to do, was to set up a place where people felt like it was their home, so that it was just something that you were always going to do, no matter what, no matter what's happening in your life, no matter what's happening at work, whatever's happening in your relationships. Strength training is going to be a constant. This is what I do no matter what. And I'm sure you experienced that when you came in.
Mm-hmm.
You would see the same faces over and over and
Yep.
over. um, when I'm looking through old videos trying to find like B-roll for content, I very often come across a lot of your videos where you're there squatting in the monolift and
Mm-hmm.
you've got like the same people spotting you each time, the same people cheering you on each time. So we were very successful in cultivating the culture that we wanted
Yeah.
to cultivate. Um, and every gym kind of brags about their culture, right? Like, oh, we've got the best culture, we've got the
Sure.
best people. You can't force that. It has to be organic.
Mm-hmm.
And it really comes down to the people who are in your facility, who are a part of what you're doing. And one of the hardest lessons that we learned along the way is that, yes, you always want to bring in new people, right? You need to bring in new leads. You need to convert people to members of your gym, members of your community, but not everybody's the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
And powerlifting, especially a sport like powerlifting, can attract some people who are very ego driven, who are very lone wolf, self centered. And I think any individualized sport requires a certain amount of self centeredness, right? Like powerlifting, bodybuilding, all these sports are selfish in a way. As a powerlifter, there are sacrifices that I make that require other people to make sacrifices too, right? Like
Sure.
my family is required to sometimes work around my schedule, because
Mm-hmm.
as a business owner too, being a business
Sure.
owner is probably the most self-centered endeavor that you can make, right? Um, because like you don't get PTO, you don't get the option of like taking multiple vacations, and so things like family time do get cut into sometimes. But the point being that there were people who came into our community at times who were not a good fit, right? They were not team players. They were there for themselves and they were not willing to help others. They were not willing to share equipment. They were not willing to make their own sacrifices for the betterment of the community. And that was a hard lesson to learn. And one bad apple can ruin it for everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
that's no good, right?
Yeah.
And there were times where um, we would have to let clients go because they had a negative interaction with another client and made that client uncomfortable. And the lifetime value of a client is infinite, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can have lifers. I have people who have been with me for 10 plus years now, and that's
Yeah.
awesome. um, but when you look at, okay, this one person could be worth X amount of revenue for however long, but if they're making the experience worse for multiple clients within your community, that can be a very expensive mistake if
Yeah.
you don't cut them out at the right time. So I think the positive experience that you had in our community very much had to do with bringing the right people in.
Sure.
And there are a lot of fitness businesses that make a ton of money by bringing in a ton of people at once, but then having a ton of churn. right?
Yeah.
It's a quick transactional thing. You see that with a lot of the more like boot camp style gyms and gyms that run like 12-week challenges and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And they're not designed for the long haul. They're not
Yeah.
designed to bring people in and have them be lifetime members of your community. And if people want to run their business that way, that's fine. I would probably have more money in my bank account if that's the way that I pursue things. Um, but I'm much happier with the relationships that I built, the friends
Mhm.
that I have. I always joke to my clients, it's like all my best friends pay me $200 a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of embarrassing.
Sure.
But most of my best friends on this planet are my clients
Yeah.
uh, because they're good people and we build relationships and they fit in our culture and our community. So, yes, we set out to develop a certain type of culture and a certain type of
Mhm.
community, but it's really the people who develop it. And you
Yeah.
have to nurture those relationships and protect your culture and your community very, very tightly.
Yeah.
Again, because you get the wrong person in that community and they can ruin it for everybody. So
Yeah.
everybody is always welcome at
Mhm.
Bonvec Strength, but not everybody is the right fit.
Yeah.
And for better or worse financially, I sleep well at night knowing that we have a community of very, very good people, good teammates who really care about each other.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where what you're saying is, the trade-off of someone who, yes, could pay you and, you like you said, you could maybe make more money, but the trade-off because of that is like, all right, am I sleeping at night? No, because this person's making me worried about X, Y, and Z, and other people in the community are now being impacted by that versus, which could impact the long run, right? It's like they could be eventually so sick of this one individual that they're like, hey, I'm gonna find somewhere else. Like this is not a comfortable place for me, and not because of you or anything like that, but maybe because of this one person. So it's almost like this investment where it's like, well, maybe it's like one, I like these people a little bit better. So let me make this call and they just weren't a right fit for the community, and that's okay. It's like this just isn't your place, and there's probably some other place that would work better for you. Um,
Like you
but
said with your when you came in, even though you
yeah,
had a lot of strength training experience, you still felt you said you felt timid, right? Like
yeah,
it's there's a certain amount of anxiety that goes into coming into a new environment
yeah,
and seeing if you fit in.
yeah,
One of our core values at Bonvec Strength is no jackasses.
yeah,
It's very, very simple.
yeah,
It's like if you're a jackass, like you don't belong here. And there's no like specific definition to what it is being a jackass, but you kind of know, right?
yeah,
And for us, it comes down to, just like being friendly with other people, being respectful,
yeah,
sharing equipment. Um, Obviously powerlifting, there's a big safety component, so
yeah,
being willing to spot other people,
sure,
being willing to receive feedback from coaching,
yeah,
being able to give feedback to the other lifters who are around you, right?
hmm,
Because if you are a member of our gym and you're spotting somebody and their lift doesn't fall within the rules of the sport. If somebody's
sure,
squatting high, or if somebody's like, rushing their pauses on the bench press,
yeah,
if you just let that person go and you don't tell them, then they're going to be worse for the wear. They're not going to have as productive training. So, um, yeah, it really just comes down to being a good teammate, because even though powerlifting is an individual sport, we're all part of a team. And
yeah,
almost every time we compete, there's usually multiple people who are competing at the same event. So you are part of a team.
yeah,
So being a good teammate is really, I think, one of the essential parts of building a good community. And when I was saying earlier that like not everybody's a good fit, it makes it sound like there are a bunch of people out there who are just like inherently, jackasses, for lack of a
yeah,
better term. Um, but a lot of it comes down to the responsibility of the coach and the business owner of
hmm,
laying out clear expectations. And I think early on, I was not great at that,
hmm,
and I so badly wanted to like make the sale and
yeah,
just get people into it. So I was not as upfront about what my expectations were, not just in terms of training, but in terms
sure,
of just in terms of behavior and
hmm,
attitude and that kind of thing. So now I think I'm much more upfront
hmm,
with leads that come in.
yeah,
It's like, here's how we conduct ourselves. Here's what's expected of you, not just from a lifting standpoint, but from a behavior standpoint. It's like
Yeah.
if you're going to be in here, you have to share equipment. If you're going to be in
Yeah.
here, you have to be willing to spot other lifters.
Hmm.
There are certain responsibilities, kind of like a code of conduct, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, and that helps across the board, right? I'm sure as somebody who coaches people who are interested in weight loss, um, you have to outline some very, very specific expectations
Yeah.
right off the bat in terms of what you expect from people from a discipline standpoint, from a
Hmm.
self accountability standpoint, especially if you're doing a lot of it online, right?
Yeah.
You're not there every moment of every day to say, okay, you should be eating this, you should be
Yeah.
making this choice, you need to be in bed at this time.
Yeah.
All these self accountability things that make up really a huge chunk of your client's success. So being willing to have like the hard conversations right off the bat to lay out expectations,
Yeah.
that was something that I learned by making a lot of mistakes on that
Yeah.
front.
Yeah. It's very true. And one of the changes I've made, specifically, with when I'm taking on clients, is like at first it's you're just trying to get the business going, so you'll kind of be more flexible and take what you can get, and that can also lead to some challenging obstacles that come with your coaching. But one thing I sort of treat, let's call it like a sales call, is yes, it's an interview so you can get to know me, but I also want to get to know you to make sure you are a good fit. So one thing I always say is like, hey, let's set up a call and make sure we're both a good fit for each other. Because if we're not, we're not. Again, not the end of the world. But with expectations we're trying to create, making sure this is, online with my values, right? I'm not going to be someone who coaches someone who's like, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. It's like, all right, this probably isn't the program for you because that's not what I do. But just to make sure we're aligned on expectations and our values and everything, lines up, then it can be a great experience for both of us. And if you're willing to, put in the work and the effort, right? Like one of the biggest challenges sometimes face is with being online is we have communication week to week with a weekly check-in, and it's a form they fill out. And I need that filled out every week because it just lets me know what's going on. This is how we're going to communicate. As far as like what happened last week, what's going on this upcoming week, all this stuff. And if I'm getting that once a month and it's supposed to be every week, it makes my job harder, but I only know as much as I know. And it's also, you're missing out on a big part of this. So just like you said, making sure expectations are aligned, making sure our communication is in check so we can both, I can help you and you can give me the insight of what's going on so I can give you the proper guidance you need. But for someone who is maybe like never touched a barbell or maybe is new to fitness, is there any advice you would give them or any tips as far as where they should start, like a newbie to the gym?
I've learned over the years that the simpler, the better.
Hmm.
And even though we are a powerlifting gym, we start everybody with simpler modalities.
Yeah.
Almost everybody who comes in starts with a lot of kettlebell stuff.
Hmm.
So we're starting with kettlebell goblet squats instead of barbell back squats.
Hmm.
We're starting with push-ups instead of bench press. We're starting with kettlebell deadlifts instead of barbell deadlifts. And I think that was part of the learning to set clearer expectations, um, helping people understand that we have certain prerequisites that you have to meet, both strength wise and technique wise, before you get to do the big, fun, heavy stuff.
Sure.
And, when I first opened my gym in 2017, um, everybody started on the heaviest, most advanced variation right away.
Hmm.
And inevitably, a lot of those people, we were having to regress them to simpler
Yeah.
variations. And that felt bad for everybody, right?
Sure.
It's like if somebody's trying to back squat and I'm doing my damnedest to coach them up on technique, and I know that it's not right for them in the moment. And then being like, okay, we tried this, but instead of squatting this 45-pound barbell, now you're going to go and you're going to squat this 8 kilogram kettlebell.
Sure.
That feels like a punishment,
Yeah.
right? And then the client feels bad. It's like, well, I'm not good enough. Like I'm not smart enough to figure this out.
Mhm.
It's not their fault. It's my fault.
Sure.
So now we just start simpler, and it's hard to systemize fitness,
Hmm.
right? A lot of people are like, I have this perfect system, but we have systemized things a little bit. where we have certain prerequisites that you have to meet before you move on to the next exercise variation. And it gives people small wins along the way. You hear that
Hmm.
all the time, right? Like clients need to have small wins in
Hmm.
order to stay engaged, in order to stay motivated. But it really works,
Hmm.
right? And it gives people something to aim for right away. And I think people are more likely, number one, to sign up,
Hmm.
after session one, where the path is very clearly outlined for them.
Sure.
But it also gives them a tremendous amount of empowerment and satisfaction and joy when they check those things off the list.
Yeah.
And I get really, really fired up working with beginners. Like
Hmm.
I always say all the time, like my favorite people to work with are total beginners because you can make a lot of progress really fast. The newbie gains are real.
Yep.
That's a real thing, that honeymoon phase where you're able to make a lot of progress really quickly. Um, but seeing the satisfaction that people get out of, starting very, very simple and then making that rapid progress and then doing things that they perhaps thought they never could,
Hmm.
and just having a lot of success along the way. And even if you do start simple, it's not easy,
Mm.
right? Like simple and easy are not the same thing.
Sure.
But yeah, it's hard to remove that stigma where it's like I have to be strong right away.
Hmm.
Like I can't step foot into your gym unless I'm really strong already. And that's probably something that all powerlifting gyms are going to struggle with, that
Hmm.
barrier for entry, whether it's real or not. Um, but yeah, you can make a lot of progress really fast as long as you start simple, as long as you start light. And I think we do a really, really good job with beginners. I say to people who are inquiring about our gym, I often will say there's a lot of places where you can get really, really good powerlifting training. There are tons of good powerlifting coaches out there, but I don't think anybody coaches beginners better than us. I
Sure.
really firmly believe that. I think we do a better job with novice lifters or people who have never strength trained before. I think we do that better than anybody for that reason, that we start
Hmm.
with the basics. We start with exercise variations and protocols where it's pretty much impossible to fail,
Yeah.
right? And if you remove that possibility of failure, people go into it with a lot more open mind and a lot more confidence because they're not presented with this situation where like they think like I might not be ready for this.
Yeah. And I bet you their buy-in, like sort of what you're saying is their buy-in is probably so much stronger at that point, right? Just starting from the very basics, all the kettlebell stuff, like you were saying. And once they are checking off those boxes, right? Those prerequisites that you were saying, and notice themselves making progress, they're probably building their self-esteem up so much more, building that confidence, self-efficacy, and like, holy shit, like I can do this, I can make progress. And they are going down that path that you directed them in, that clear path. And that buy-in is just so much more stronger at this point, where now they're developing the habit of being even more consistent, having even more determination. And it's just sort of that cycle, right? They just keep buying in more and more just from taking that little approach of, hey, let's start here. It's okay. Like rather than having to regress where it might impact you in a negative way, let's just start here and then we can always move forward and just have so much more of I keep saying buying because I can't think of another word, but so much more of a buy-in because of that. So I think that's very true. And again, even from my experience, seeing all forms of life at the gym, right? I agree. I think you guys do a phenomenal job. The way you coach people, the way you approach people, and how you can get them strong in a safe manner as well, like in a smart way as well. Now, I want to ask this question just because of, again, some of these listeners who are busy, parents, busy professionals, have that busy schedule. What does a realistic and even an effective strength training routine look like? Like, what does that look like for someone? Even from your experience, you're running a business, you're got two kiddos, you're a husband, like you're a busy person. So, what does I guess, a realistic yet like pretty effective training strength training routine look like?
I think 3 days a week of strength training is kind of the bare minimum.
Okay.
And I say to new people, our training is broken up into levels.
Hmm.
We have level one, level two, level three. Not very creative. It could be called beginner, intermediate, advanced, but we just call it one, two, and three.
Sure.
And people who come in, everybody starts in level one, and level one programming is designed to be done 3 days a week. And I tell people 2 days a week is not enough. 4 days a week at the beginning is probably no better than three. So just
Hmm.
do three.
Sure.
And if you start with less, you're more likely to effectively complete 100% of your training. And that's
Hmm.
motivating. If somebody comes in right off the bat and is expecting to train 6 days a week, but they only get three, they feel bad about it.
Sure.
Three is good, but if you are intending to do six and you only do three, it's demotivating versus just starting with less and completing 100% of it. And then at some point, the stronger you get, the more you have to train to keep getting stronger. So just start with less. I don't like the term minimum effective dose because I think it gives like this connotation of like purposely like not training hard,
Sure.
but there is a certain minimum threshold that you probably have to meet. So 3 days a week tends to be the sweet spot for most people. And I think like in a perfect world, newer lifters would train very often, but not a lot. I
Hmm.
think like if it were feasible, I think new lifters probably should train a little bit every
Hmm.
single day to make it, like a habit that sticks.
Yep.
But just in our environment, it makes more sense to do 3 days a week. Full body workouts, I think, are a must have. I
Hmm.
think that research very strongly suggests that novice lifters detrain quickly.
Hmm.
Um, if somebody's brand new to strength training and they train 1 day a week, it's very feasible that, 7 days later they come back and work out again, that their progress has probably come back to baseline.
Okay.
So there has to be a frequency component. And
Hmm.
that's where even if you're training 3 days a week, if you're splitting it like into body parts, it's like, okay, on Monday I'm going to train chest and back.
Hmm.
On Wednesday, I'm going to train legs. And then on Friday, I'm going to train like arms or something like that. You're only training each major muscle group once a week. And
Sure.
again, it's very, very likely that by the time you come back to that muscle group, that you've gone back to baseline. So full body workouts, I think, are an absolute necessity. So when our lifters come in and train, our level one lifters, they're training full body every day.
Yeah.
So on day one, they're going to focus on squat and bench. On day two, they're going to focus on deadlift and some sort of like overhead pressing variation. And then on day three, they're going to squat, bench, and deadlift. So they're doing
Hmm.
each main lift twice a week.
Cool.
So they do train every major muscle group 3 times a week. And that seems to be the amount of frequency that's going to give them a lot of progress. So it's both logistically feasible, but it's also like scientifically shown to be the right amount of frequency to make progress. So yeah, 3 days a week, full body workouts. The body part splits do not make sense for most people.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, when you're training full body, you can't do a ton of everything, and
Hmm.
that's good. Because if you just like absolutely, annihilate one muscle group once a week, it's not spread out enough. And
Sure.
also the actual like impact and the recovery cost of each workout is going to be a little bit less. And when you're new to strength training, I've found that one of the biggest barriers for getting consistent is soreness and fatigue, right?
Hmm.
And again, laying out clear expectations. When new people come into the gym, I tell them tomorrow you're going to be really sore.
Yeah.
Even if we do a workout that feels to me like barely anything,
Hmm.
if you've never strength trained before, or
Yeah.
if you're coming back to strength training after a really long layoff, you feel like shit the next
Yeah.
day. And a lot of people in the past would not show up for their second training session. I'd be like, okay, hey, missed you today. What happened? And they're like, oh, I was so sore. Like I didn't
Hmm.
want to train again. That's
Sure.
not good.
Yeah.
you know, so by doing full body workouts 3 days a week, 1 day off, at least 1 day off in between each one, it allows for a little bit more recovery and it helps people feel ready to do their next training session. So simply laying out that expectation that like, yes, you're going to be sore, but you do need to come in again. And
Yeah.
the more often you come in and the more consistent you are, the faster that soreness, that unpleasant feeling is going to subside. And if people can just get into that routine and come in even when they feel sore, eventually that kind of breaking in period will subside, and you won't feel so miserable after each training session.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I remember there was a note. I think it was on the hypertrophy program I did of yours. It was I read it the way I read it was something along the lines of like, hey, if you're sore, you're okay, just do a warm up and it'll subside. Is and the way I took it was like, hey, you're fine, just like fucking go. Like you'll be okay. Just warm up,
Yep.
stretch it out, it'll be okay.
It's really true.
Yeah.
Like exercise does have like a pain relief effect.
Hmm.
And that goes for people of all experience levels, right? Like the stronger you get, the harder you have to keep training and the more often you should train. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like reverse compound interest. It kind of sucks, right? It's not
Yeah.
fair, but
Yeah.
that's just the way it goes. The stronger you get, the harder you have to keep working to keep making progress.
Yep.
But honestly, yeah, if you feel sore, if you feel tired, the best thing you can do is just like show up and do the warm up.
Hmm.
And then if you still feel terrible after the warm up, sure, we'll modify the training session. But probably the worst thing you can do is nothing at all.
Yeah.
Um, and more often than not, if people come in and they're not feeling it and they're not feeling super motivated and physically they don't feel great, whether it's soreness or joint pain or whatever, usually you can convince them or they can convince themselves to still train hard after
Yeah.
they've done the warm up. They feel better. The hardest part is often just getting there in the first place.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, what's one of the biggest, let's call it like a mindset struggle you see from your people, your clients, or just people in general with their training? And I guess to follow up that question is, how would you help them build, whether it's more mental toughness or help them work through that struggle?
Probably thinking that they don't have enough time.
Okay.
And that is a real objection for a lot of people.
Hmm.
I'm very lucky that I train where I work, and
Yeah.
my schedule is set up so that I almost never miss a training session. I almost always train right after my coaching shift is done. I don't have to leave work, drive elsewhere, change my clothes. I don't have to deal with that whole sort of thing. So I'm very lucky in that sense. But almost everybody else does, right? It's another place they have to go. It's not just the time investment of the workout, it's the time investment of the driving and the, making sure I have like my meals packed and make sure I have my gym bag packed. Um, but I think that if people are more honest with themselves and kind of like audit where their time is spent, they realize that perhaps they have a little bit more time than what they do. And one of my one of my least favorite conversations to have is the conversation with a client who says that they don't have enough time to train. And then I asked them like, well, could you get up earlier and go before work? Could could you start work 30 minutes earlier so you could get out 30 minutes earlier and
Mm,
get to the gym after work? And a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around the idea that they can request from the other people in their life who are demanding of their time, whether it's their family, whether it's their employer, whatever.
sure.
But if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Yep.
So I think that if people are having a hard time finding the time to train, they need to ask others to help them provide the time to train because it's so important. Like there's nothing more important than your health. You're going to be a better worker, you're going to be a better spouse, you're going to be a better parent if you are physically fit and healthy. So
Hmm.
it's worth carving out the time
Yeah.
to do that. And I think a lot of people just need help, need an unbiased third party to
Hmm.
look at where they're spending their time
Yeah.
and finding the time around those obligations to make time for themselves. And they think like, oh, like I can't sacrifice time at work, I can't sacrifice time at home in
Hmm.
order to do this. It feels like a selfish thing.
Hmm.
Um, but this self-centered endeavor of exercising makes you more available to all the other people that
Yeah.
need you.
Hmm.
So you owe it to yourself to exercise because it's so good for you as the individual to be
Yeah.
healthy. But I think you also owe it to the people who count on you to be healthy and energetic and productive. So yeah, it's a hard conversation to have,
Yeah.
but when you pitch it that way, I think people are a little bit more willing to figure it out and make it happen. And it's sometimes it's frustrating when a would-be client says that they can't get up early in the morning. It's not that you can't, it's that you won't.
Yeah, you don't
It's
want
a
to.
Yeah, and I get it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to train at 5:30 in the morning either,
Mm.
but our most well-attended training session 6 days a week is
Hmm.
5:30 a.m. And
Yeah.
these people get it, and they
Mm.
get out of bed early to make sure they can get to the gym and train hard, and that then requires them to go to bed early the night before.
Hmm.
So there are some sacrifices that need to be made,
Sure.
but that's what life is. Life is all
Yeah.
about sacrifice. Life is all about compromise. It's all about
Mm.
getting a little uncomfortable. But I don't think there's anything more worthy of that sacrifice than spending time and energy bettering
Sure.
yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like that. I don't want to call it a cliche saying, but it's like sort of the choose your hard, right? Like you can
Yep.
not strength train, right? And that's fine, but there's going to be hard things that come because of it later on in life, maybe now, or we can choose to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or have that hard conversation or have that tough conversation and start to make this happen. But I like what you said with the idea of, being selfish to be selfless, right? You start carving out time, taking care of yourself to strength train, but it gives you so much more bandwidth in life. Like you're able to handle stress, right? Without maybe being so reactive or so, emotional about it, where it's like, it's okay. It's fine. Your strength training did something for you, right? There is a very much therapeutic effect that comes from working out. So when you are strength training, it gives you this like bandwidth to, you know, make sure you take care of your busy schedule and you can do it in let's call it like a sane manner and not feel so insane about it versus when you don't strength train, you might just be, all over the place emotionally because of it. So last couple questions I have for you here. And if there's anything I missed, please feel free to mention it. But what is one, or again, one or a couple, one thing you maybe knew or wish you knew earlier on in your fitness journey or your fitness career?
That's a good question. Um, I think that early on in my fitness career, um, as a lifter, I was probably like a little bit too short-sighted with my training approach. And like every single training session was like life or death.
Sure.
Like I'm lifting for like right now and not
Hmm.
lifting for like next week or next month or next year. Um, and that probably led to some of the orthopedic issues that I dealt with not that long ago. Not seeing like the bigger picture, and I think getting into competitive powerlifting helped with that
Hmm.
because it is a long-term thing. You're training not just for this individual training session, but you're training for the meet that's 8, 10, 12, 16 weeks from now.
Hmm.
So having that more like 10,000 foot view, like long term training approach. Um, I probably would have, in hindsight, been more attentive to technique. I think a
Hmm.
big reason why I ended up having a hip replacement was because I just like squatted with suboptimal technique for a long, long time. Um, Not necessarily like squatting with like shitty technique, but
Yeah.
squatting in a way that like didn't fit my body all that
Sure.
well. It really came from probably squatting with way too wide of a stance for a long,
Hmm.
long time. Because like I learned about powerlifting through Westside Barbell, and it's
Hmm.
like those guys all weighed 300 pounds and they were
Sure.
squatting over 1,000 pounds and they were multiply squatters squatting in squat suits. So they squatted a certain way. So I was going to squat that way.
Yeah.
And I think if I had just maybe sought out some instruction from a coach who knew what they were doing, I probably
Hmm.
could have avoided a lot of that stuff. Um, but that has led me as a coach to coach lifters in a much more like self-discovery way,
Hmm.
where it's like we try different stances and we try different loading positions, with a kettlebell in a goblet position, or like a double kettlebell front squat or a one arm kettlebell front squat, and help the lifter figure out on their own what works best for their body instead of
Hmm.
just like spoon feeding it.
Yeah.
And I think coaches in all sectors of fitness are probably more like biomechanically inclined now than they were 10, 15 years ago when I first got into coaching. But you
Hmm.
still see a fair amount of dogma in strength training among coaches, where it's like, this is the way that you have to squat.
Sure.
um, and that's just silly, right?
Mm.
Because everybody's built differently, everybody's shaped differently.
Yep.
So, and nobody is going to know what's best in terms of a squat stance or a squat technique or whatever. Nobody's going to know that more than the individual. So if you
Hmm.
give them the environment and the tools to like feel different things
Yeah.
and be able to choose what feels best, I think that's going to set people up for success in the long term. So I think both as a lifter and as a coach, if I could go back in time, I would spend more time like paying attention to like what felt good for me
Yeah.
and try to pass that along to other lifters, because there are very few objectively wrong ways to lift
Hmm.
and many right ways to lift.
Sure.
But it takes some time to figure that out. So I think I would probably still have like both of my organic hips
Yeah.
if I had adopted that mindset earlier on.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of invest in the long run with it. Um,
Yep.
what's a fitness myth or a trend that is driving you crazy?
Oh boy. Um, Something that really grinds my gears right now is the idea that if something is not optimal, it's a
Hmm.
waste of time. And I think that's a little bit more prevalent in like the bodybuilding world right now.
Hmm.
There's a lot of like, oh, there's like you see all these like graphics where it's like tiers of exercises, right? It's like S tier, then A tier, then B tier, and blah 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 down the line. And I think it kind of gives the idea that if you're not like choosing like the perfect exercise with like the perfect amount of like stability and the perfect amount of like the line of pull and all this biomechanical shit, that it's like a waste of time. And that's not true.
Hmm.
Like if an example might be like, there's a lot of research coming out now that shows that exercises that bias like the lengthened component of an exercise, and you have more mechanical tension when a muscle is lengthened, that's
Hmm.
going to be a better exercise. Yes, that might be true, but example would be like doing like a dumbbell preacher curl
Hmm.
versus like a regular barbell curl.
Sure.
Yes, the preacher curl is probably like objectively better for muscle growth, but it doesn't mean that like the barbell curl is a waste of time.
Sure.
Um, it's like this all or nothing approach.
Yeah.
So there's so many different things you can do to make progress. Are some better than others? For sure. But people kind of get that paralysis by analysis, where it's like,
Yeah.
if I'm not doing the perfect thing, then I'm just wasting my time.
Yep.
That's not true. That's not true at all. There's so many different things you can do. And for so many people, the barrier for entry is like just getting started.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I'm sure you experience this in the nutrition world too, where
Hmm.
it's like, oh, like I'm not following like the perfect diet.
Yep.
So I'm not going to pay attention to my nutrition at all. Like
Yeah.
that's such bullshit.
Yep.
You just have to do something and be
Yeah.
consistent with it.
Yep.
And as long as you're doing something with consistency
Yeah.
and with enthusiasm, it's going to work.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And that whole I like to call it like the perfectionism mindset. I think one is just like a justification to procrastinate. Just like,
Yep.
that's your justification, your excuse for it. But I think, one thing I always try to hammer down with people is like, yeah, say this isn't, we're not being 100% consistent or 90% consistent with, our training and our nutrition. Doesn't mean, 70% won't get us progress right now. Like I know the goal will probably be really consistent, but just because we're not, that high or that consistent, or again, want to follow this perfect plan, doesn't mean this other plan won't work because one, it's more than you're currently doing right now. So like that's gonna be progress in itself. But I think some people think they're just not gonna make progress if it's not perfect. But it's like, hey, this works very well too, and it's still going to make you progress along the way. And again, more for specifically my clientele is like, they want to start off with, perfect nutrition, perfect training, steps in place, perfect sleep, all these things where it's like, all right, those things are all out of whack right now. But if we just start walking a little bit more, getting some strength training in, and starting to pay attention to our nutrition, again, not being so perfect with our calories and our protein, but like, yes, we have to have some intention there. Even though it's not perfect, it's still going to allow you to build momentum and make progress and lead you down a path where we're only going to continue progressing, right? It's sort of like you take your new clients. It's like, hey, we're going to start here and we're going to start checking off boxes and making progress moving forward to get you to those barbell squats, to the back squats and everything there. But just because, again, it's not perfect or anything like that doesn't mean it's not going to not make you progress. Um, so I guess my last question, um, just because I think we went over a lot of good nuggets and tips today, and even from your experience with strength training and powerlifting in particular, what what does like I guess success in fitness mean to you, or like really how do you feel like strength training and lifting weights can change someone's life? Because it really can, in my opinion. So I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I think it's the empowerment component
Yeah.
that we talked about earlier is just challenging your body to do things that perhaps you thought you could never do before.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people just assume that they're like not cut out for heavy strength training. But everybody has to start somewhere,
Yeah.
and we're all made of the same raw materials. We're all made of the same bones and tendons and muscles, and like anybody can do this,
Yeah.
but you just have to be willing to be a beginner
Hmm.
and just start where you are and not assume that just because like you don't nobody walks into a gym for the first time as a record setting power lifter.
Hmm.
You have to start somewhere. And every person that you look up to on social media, everybody who you look up to in professional sports, like, yeah, maybe they started with like more of a genetic advantage than you did, but they still started
Yeah.
somewhere. So, like, you just have to start.
Yeah.
And if you start simple and you start light and you start with some good instruction, you
Hmm.
hire a coach, you ask for help from one of your friends who's done this already.
Hmm.
Like, don't try to do it alone.
Hmm.
Like I started alone, which I'm actually very grateful that I did, because I enjoyed the process of figuring it out. And I think if
Hmm.
I had not had to figure it out on my own, I probably wouldn't have got interested in coaching.
Hmm.
But there are so many resources at everyone's disposal if you're willing to look for it and you're willing to. Obviously, there's a financial commitment to
Hmm.
asking for help, um, but the time that you put into it will be much more well spent if you seek out instruction. Easy for me to say because coaching pays my bills,
Yeah.
but like if you think about like any other endeavor, like financial management, for
Hmm.
example, it's like I don't think many people would ever think about trying to like manage their own finances and do like their own investing or whatever, on their own. They would seek
Hmm.
out a professional because it's a very important thing, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to waste your money
Yeah.
by, trying to do it on your own. Same thing with fitness. Like, you don't have to do it by yourself. So
Hmm.
find somebody who has the skill set and the knowledge to help you so you're not spinning your wheels,
Right.
because you can spend a lot of time and energy exercising and not seeing the results because you're unwilling to ask for help.
Right.
So yeah, swallow your pride,
Yeah.
find somebody who can help you, and then the time and energy and money that you do spend is going to come back around and you'll get a
Yeah.
better return on your investment because you'll have the right methods and also somebody to hold you accountable as
Yeah.
well. I think that's probably another one of the big things that people miss the mark on, because if you're just doing it by yourself, you're much more likely to let yourself off the hook than
Hmm.
you are to let your coach, or you don't want to let your coach down. You don't want to let your training
Yeah.
partners down.
Yeah.
So by having somebody in your corner to help you, not just with the actual X's and O's of training, but also the accountability standpoint,
Yeah.
I think that is much more likely to lead to success.
Absolutely. Two things that I really liked you said is, the way I think about it is if I have to change the oil of my car, I don't know how to do that. I'm far from a handyman. I'm not afraid
Same.
to admit it.
Yeah.
I'm far from a handyman. The things we hang up on our walls here are like stickers. I'm not using a hammer and a nail to hang something up. But if I have to, change the oil of my car, I'm bringing it to a mechanic. Like I'm not doing it myself. I don't know what I'm doing. And like you said too, is the return on investment. There's like areas in our life where investing, whether it's money or time and effort into your relationships, your career, your health, where the return on investment is just going to be so worth it. It's going to be so valuable to obviously like, living in good health is obviously important, but just what you get out of training, whether it's stronger, more confidence, the relationships you make in the gym are amazing. Um, so I think that that's just a valuable point as well. Just the ROI on it is just, next to none on how valuable it is in your life. But what's coming up next for you, man? Anything on the books as far as powerlifting meets, anything for the team?
We've got two meets coming up this weekend. We have a meet on Saturday where we have three lifters competing in Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Cool.
Then I've got another client who's competing in Stoneham, Massachusetts on Sunday. Then next big thing, we have our Powerlifting United Nationals in New Jersey in July. I'm competing. We have another handful of lifters who are competing. We also have a big charity event on May 10th. We're doing a push pull charity powerlifting meet. So push pull means just bench and deadlift. There's no squats.
Mhm.
But we're raising money for Second Chance Animal Services, one of our
Cool.
favorite animal rescue organizations. Um, our community loves animals. I get to bring my dog Lemmy to the gym with me almost every day. My coach Chris brings his dog Snickers. So we're dog people.
Mhm.
So this is a big event that we did our first one last year. It was very successful. So we're doing it
Cool.
again this year. So that's coming up in May. So yeah, lots of stuff going on. Probably about like 50% of our clientele actively competes in powerlifting. So those are kind of the big events that we do. But even our clients who don't compete, they'll very often, come out to the events
Sure.
to cheer people on. This charity event is super low key, super casual. So we have a lot of first time competitors doing
Hmm.
that. People at the gym who maybe aren't interested in doing like a fully sanctioned powerlifting meet where they have to wear a singlet and weigh
Yeah.
in and kind of do all those high anxiety things. They can just show up and lift.
Cool.
So we're very, very excited for that coming up in May.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, is there anything else I missed?
I don't think so. I think we spoke in a lot of just generalities and cliches, if you will, but
Yeah.
they're cliches for a reason.
Yep.
Um, the stuff is pretty simple. The
Hmm.
hardest thing is I think oftentimes like getting started, getting consistent. So if the listeners take anything away from this whole conversation, I think it's just like start as simple as you can
Hmm.
and you can get more aggressive, more complicated as it goes along. But one of the biggest mistakes you can make is just trying to start with too much, start with too complex of a plan.
Yeah.
The simpler you can start, the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. And how can people find you?
Our number one social media is our Instagram at
Okay.
Bonvec_strength, Bonvec, Bonvec. We put out a ton of content on our Instagram.
Mhm.
A lot of informative content, a lot of motivational content. Yeah,
Mhm.
if people want to see like what our community is all about, check out our Instagram at Bonvec_strength.
Absolutely. And if you are in the Massachusetts area, I highly recommend going to check out Bonvec Strength. Tony himself is an incredible coach. Again, like I was saying earlier, from my experience, it was an incredible experience. Nothing but positive things to say about you, man. And especially if you're looking to get really freaking strong. He's the guy to go to. But Tony, man, thank you so much for hopping on this. I appreciate you and your time.
Thank you, Kevin. This was fun.
Good. All right, gang. Well, if you guys need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. As always, I believe in you. I trust you. Go eat the damn donut, and we'll talk soon.